latest edition of HR Hot Topics. I'm your host, Jody Schaefer, and my aim is to make this the most informative 5 minutes, maybe 8 of your month. As you can tell, I'm back at my kitchen table, folks, back from my whirlwind trip abroad, and excited to bring you this month's version of HR Hot Topics, in which we are going to revisit a topic we talked about several months ago, and that is I-9s. So as a reminder to all of you, the I-9 is a form that you have to complete for all new employees, all of your W-2 employees, and it verifies their eligibility to work in the U.S. legally. So this is the form that you're filling out as you look at the employee's passport or perhaps their social security card and driver's license, and you're just doing a visual inspection to verify that the individual in front of you actually has the legal paperwork to work in the U.S. Legally. And so that form is not a form that you send anywhere. You actually keep it on file in case you were ever audited. And for anyone that's been through an I-9 audit, you know what a pain in the butt that can be, because there are so many different sections of that form. And if you miss one section, then it's like an automatic, dollar amount in fines. So it can add up pretty quickly. And then to top it off, they keep changing the form. And you have to have the most recent version of the form. Now, that's what I talked to you about last time on the video, was that a new form was coming out, and I was telling you, be ready, the old form expires, and so you gotta have the new form, and then lo and behold, Department of Homeland Security never did publish the new form. If you go to the website, it just says, it's coming, but keep using the old form, and that's still where we sit. Apparently it's still coming, but they do have a form on there. I think it's put through the end of October or something, but it's not the most recent one. And they keep telling us that the most recent one will be posted soon. So, for all intents and purposes, anytime you have a new employee, it is best to go directly to the website, and you can simply type in I-9 form, I-9 form in your search bar, and it will bring up the PDF version of the most recent one that is available. So I would do that every single time rather than printing out one and then making copies of that over and over and over again. That way you can make sure that you've got the most recent form and avoid that costly mistake. But that's not why I'm coming to you today. I'm coming to you today because on July 25th, the Department of Homeland Security came out with an announcement that basically ended all COVID-era flexibilities around how you examine documents. So if you recall, during COVID, many of you were limited to remote work. You were not allowed to bring your employees in the workplace. Some of you have continued to have remote staff as a result of that. And yet, as I said, every time a new employee is hired, you're supposed to fill out this form, and you were supposed to physically examine the documents that the employee presented. Well, if the employee is working remotely, how are you supposed to physically examine the documents? Or, during COVID, when they couldn't come in person, what were you supposed to do? And so the government, in their infinite wisdom, did decide that during that era, it was okay to virtually examine documents. And employers did that in a number of ways. Well, those flexibilities have now come to an end. At the end of July, that was the end of the COVID era flexibility around examining documents virtually. And so Department of Homeland Security on the 25th of July came out with new guidance that says, okay, basically, you've got two options, employers. For anyone who examined those I-9 documents virtually during COVID, so from March 20th of 2020 through July 31st of 2023, during that period of time, if you had brought any new employees into the workplace and you examined their documents virtually, you have the month of August to now go back to those employees, and you have to examine the documents physically. So even if they're a remote employee, you have to get your hands on the physical documents if they were hired during that period of time and you never saw the physical documents initially. Now remember, with I-9 compliance, you can delegate that part of the inspection to a representative. So if the employee lives in a state other than where you operate, and you don't intend to travel to them and they don't intend to travel to you, you could potentially authorize another individual in that state, perhaps what do they call those folks a notary? Maybe you could find a notary in the state You could have the individual go to the notary. Oftentimes banks will have notaries on staff, and they could be the ones that physically examine the documents. So there are a couple workarounds, if the person doesn't live in the same state as you, but someone has to physically examine those documents, and you have until August 30th to do that. There is a section on the form, the existing form, and actually I'm going to bring it up right now. So as you're looking at the form, there's a section that is called alternate information or alternative information. It's just an empty box there, and there is some language about where you would place notations for the physical examination. So you would write the date that you examined the documents virtually, and then you would put a second note that says the date that you examined them or someone examined them physically. So there's some guidance on what you write there. So I'll place that, an article about that in the notes, but also, I'm showing it on the screen here. There is an alternative procedure, and this gets a little bit murky, so bear with me here. So if you are enrolled in E-Verify as an employer, if you're using E-Verify for your I-9 process, and you did a remote verification of a new hire during that period of time when COVID allowed for virtual inspection of documents, and you created a case number for that specific employee in E-Verify, then you have an alternative method. Rather than verifying those documents physically by the end of August, you could verify them remotely, but it has to be through a live video session with the employee. So you physically see the employee's face, they're holding up the documentation, you assert that, yes, this is in fact the individual, yes, those documents look legitimate, and that would suffice. Again, you would note that in the section on the I-9 form called alternative information, and I'm showing that here on the screen. The notation is somewhat different because you inspected them virtually versus physically, but you would note that there. So kind of a bifurcated process here. If you are enrolled in E-Verify, you have this option for the alternative process for those I-9s that were inspected remotely during COVID. If you are not enrolled in E-Verify, or you inspected any of these documents virtually and you just don't want to go through that whole process, then you are required to inspect those documents physically. And again, make the note, both of those processes, whichever one you decide to go with, have to be completed by August 30th, so this month. So you want to, run a payroll report, see which new hires you had after the 20th of March, and then take a look and see who you've got to follow up with, and then document accordingly on their I-9s. And as a reminder, there are fines if you ever get audited and this has not been done correctly. So it's worth taking the time to do. It is a bit complex. I'll add some articles to help you along your way, and we put some screenshots up too, just to help guide you in the right direction. But of course, if you have any questions, you can reach me directly, Jody Schaefer at workwithhrm.com. And with that, I will leave you to get ready for the back to school madness, and we'll pick this back up in September.